Hi, my name is Kerry Goulder from Kid Giddy, and I'm here today to show you how to make the jacket from my new Sizzix doll clothes die. This jacket will fit on the Sizzix doll as well as the Sizzix fox from my other two dies. So to get started, we're going to need some wool felt. This is actually a bamboo blend wool felt, or you can use just a regular wool fabric in obviously all these different colors you can choose from. You can also use a quilter's cotton. I'm going to show you the basic construction of it, and then I'm going to show you a couple other things that you can make with this same pattern piece to make other things like this little vest and a couple others. So I'm going to be using this bamboo felt, and I'm going to have my 25-inch die. I'm going to have some 25-inch cutting pads, but for the jacket pieces, I really only need a smaller set of cutting pads. And then I'm going to have my Big Shot, and this die also works on the entire Big Shot family. So to start, we need to line up our jacket piece on the fold. So if you'll look at this die, there's steel rule die along the bottom edge of this piece, along the side, armpit, shoulder, and neck. But on this edge, there is nothing that's going to cut that fabric. That means that you get to decide where you're going to cut that edge. For the back of the jacket, we're going to make sure that we have a fold right here, and we need to line up the fold with this end point and this end point. To do that, or to make it a little bit easier for you, we're going to use a little piece of washi tape, and we're just going to put that right along the edge. So I'm going to line up that end mark and this end mark. If you don't want to put washi tape on your die, that's okay. You can just eyeball it. But that'll make it a little bit easier for you to see where that edge is for the fold. So we are going to take one piece here. I'm going to line up the fold edge there and the fold edge here. And I'm going to trim off the rest of this. And like I said, because this is a smaller piece, you can just use one of the smaller cutting pads. And it shifted a little while I was cutting. So I'm just going to make sure that I line it up one more time before I put it through. You need one back panel for the back of the jacket. And if you line it up just right, it'll cut all the way through. You might have one or two threads. There's one little thread there and a little bit there. So I'm just going to snip that right off. And here's my jacket back panel. So now we have to cut the two front. For the front panel pieces, you need to decide if you want to have extra fabric in the front to fold over and crisscross over so that you can use buttons or something else, or you can just have the ends meet together and use a frog closure or something like that. So I will let you decide which way you want to do it. I am going to add just a little bit extra. So I'm actually going to go over the edge here where the washi tape is. I'm going to make sure it's just over the edge of that, but I still want it to be straight because I don't want it to be off too much. I'm going to make sure that my fabric covers this little point, and then I'm going to slip that right through again. I love having this cut out all my pieces for me. So now we have a bigger space that we have to cut off because that was on the fold, or beyond the fold, if you want to say that. And then we have to cut right down the center. If you want to use a rotary cutter for this, so you have a much straighter line than I'm getting right now, you can do that too. So now we have our two front pieces. We have our back panel piece, and then we need our two sleeves. So let's cut those little sleeves out. So I just need to figure out which way my stretch goes. So the stretch on this felt is a little hard to figure out, but you can start to feel it. It's a little bit easier. I don't want it to stretch too much, so I'm going to go where it's the sleeve will go across this way and it's not stretchy. So I'm just going to cut a little chunk of that. The sleeve is not cut on the fold, so you want to make sure it's wide enough, and this way you can actually cut two at a time. Line it up to the top. Line it up to the bottom. And we'll slip it through and I'll show you how to start sewing it up. So now I'm done cutting out my pieces. I've got a back piece, 2 front panel pieces, and I've got 2 sleeves. We're going to start by sewing up the sleeves, which are really easy. We're going to sew a bottom hem, and then we're going to fold it in half and sew that straight edge. There is a wrong side and a right side to felt, so make sure that when you're doing this, you're folding the hem to the side that is the wrong side, so that when you're finished, you've got the hem on the correct side. I'm going to start with a little piece of fabric, just so it doesn't bunch up my edge. I'm just going to do a simple stitch. If you're using a wool material or a quilter's cotton, you may want to roll a double hem, or you may want to even serge your edge or zigzag your edge before folding it over. It's really easy to chain piece when you can, so that you're not having to start and stop each time. You don't have to lock in your stitches in the beginning or the end of this part, but you will when you're sewing them in half. So all you do now is fold so that it's right sides facing, and you're just going to stitch up along the straight edge. Do not stitch the top, because that's the shoulder and you want to leave that open. And then when I'm done with that, I'll cut off the other one and sew the other one as well. Again, back stitch, just so you have your stitch locked in. And back stitch at the end too. Once you finish stitching your sleeve seam, say that 5 times fast, you're going to carefully turn this right side out. When you do it, don't tug too much on this part, because this will stretch it out and it'll make it a little too big to fit inside the hole of the armpit. So I prefer to actually bunch up the end and just kind of shimmy it up through the top. That way I'm not stretching this piece out by pulling it over all the rest of it. And then just pull it down gently. Okay? Now you have 2 sleeves. You can make these sleeves any length you want. They don't have to be long sleeve. For a jacket, obviously it makes sense, but if you're making it with quilter's cotton, you can do short sleeve, 3/4 length sleeve. It's really up to you. Now we're going to sew the body of the jacket. So to do that, again, we want to make sure we find our right sides of the fabric and our wrong sides. It's a little easier when I haven't pressed to figure out which side is correct. So this is the back side, and this is the front side, so we want to flip them over. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew our top shoulder pieces, and then we're going to sew the sides. So again, I've got my leader fabric in here because these are really small pieces on the shoulder here, so I just want to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to stitch one shoulder, 1/4 inch back stitch the front and back. This might actually be a little less than 1/4 inch, but that's okay because the sleeve is a little smidge bigger, because I wanted to give you more options by having it a little bigger. Okay, so now I'm going to sew the side seams. Back stitch at the beginning and the end here as well. Now we have our jacket pieces put together. So we've sewn the top 2 shoulders, we've sewn the sides, and now it's time to sew the sleeves into the armholes. Okay, so to do that, you want to leave it right side in, and you want to have the sleeves right side out. Press your sleeve so that you have a nice crisp crease right there, and you're going to line that up with the top of the shoulder. So you're going to stick it right through there, line it up, and then pin that in place. Now you're going to take the bottom and you're going to line up the 2 seams right at the very bottom, which is the armpit. And you want to press open those seams, which will help to reduce some of the bulk later on. Now this is the tricky part, but it's still pretty easy. So you've got this little extra piece in here. Depends on which type of fabric you're using. Some will be a little more difficult, some will be a lot easier. This wool felt, bamboo felt, actually has a little bit of give, so it's a little bit easier. If you feel like there's too much excess in there, just adjust your seam allowances. So you can either go a little bit skinnier of a seam allowance on the shoulder and the body, or you can do a little bit of a larger seam allowance on the sleeve. Either way, it's pretty easy to make it fit. So again, with the quilter's cotton, when I had made one, I just added a smidge of a seam allowance on the arm. So you're just going to pin it in place, and then we're going to sew all the way around. So just place it right under your needle, remove that first pin, back stitch at the beginning and the end. So when I'm doing this, I like to leave my needle down, and then I just rotate a little bit at a time. The more pins you put in, the easier it is to keep those pieces together, but it will make it a little more difficult as you're going around, because then you're fighting all these pins right in the way of your foot. So you can hand baste it really quick, just so that you don't have all the pins to worry about. That can make it a little easier. Once you've finished sewing on the first sleeve, go ahead and sew on the second sleeve.